Good afternoon, students. So today we are going to start with the biology syllabus. Today I am going to start with biology part 2, the first chapter, organization of cell. Okay, so as the chapter is given the title as organization of cell, let's try to understand first why the chapter is given the name as organization of cell. What is the theme or the motto behind it? Okay, organization. You might have heard this word many a times, right? Let's take a simple example. If we want to have a cricket match, right? Is it possible with 2 players? No. 3 or 4 players? No. When total 11 players will unite with each other, there is a cricket team. Say example, if we want to celebrate a Teachers' Day program at school or institute, right? Is it possible with 5-6 students? No. 10 students? No. When the entire students of the class will unite with each other, they will celebrate the Teachers' Day. Like that, the cell is generally made up of different cell organelles, right? When all these cell organelles unite with each other, they generally lead to the organization of cell. So here comes the chapter, organization of cell. Now, let's talk about the cell. We all know that what exactly is cell, and without cell, the life cannot exist on the earth, right? Okay, take a simple example, the formation of a small baby. Right? Whenever there is a fertilization between the male sex gamete sperm and the female sex gamete ovum, it leads to the formation of a zygote, right? Zygote is a single celled state structure. When the zygote undergoes division, it leads to the formation of an embryo. Embryo leads to the formation of a fetus. And finally, in between 9 months, there is a formation of a small baby. And that is only possible from a single cell. Right? So, without cell, life cannot exist. So, what is exactly cell? So, we all know there is a valid definition for the cell. Cell is defined as the structural and functional unit of the life. Correct? Cell is defined as the structural and functional unit of the life. Why it is called structural and functional? Because the structure of an organism and the function taking place in the organism is only possible because of the cell. We are being provided with a proper definite shape or a framework, correct? Isn't it? Many functions are taking place in the body: digestion, excretion, respiration, circulation, etc. These are all under the control of the cell. So we can say that cell is defined as the structural and functional unit of the life. Now, how did the cell generally got discovered, or how the cell generally came into an existence, right? So, there was a scientist who was a cytologist. Do you know what a cytologist? Who generally studies about the cell. So one of the cytologists called Robert Hooke in 1665 for the very first time introduced the term cell. Right? Okay. So the cell term was introduced by Robert Hooke. He generally saw this in the cork cell which are present in the barks of the tree. Now, when the cork cell were been observed under microscope, right, he found that it gave a honeycomb-like appearance. Honeycomb-like appearance means it looked like small compartments or the small blocks. That's why the term cell is derived from a Latin or a Greek word that is cellulae, which means smaller compartment. Like that, the cell generally came into existence, or you can say the cell was generally discovered by Robert Hooke, who was a cytologist, right? Now, George Palade is generally called as the father of cell biology. He was the first to generally study the cell biology, and that's why he is generally called father of cell biology. That is George Palade, right? Now, let's talk about cytology, right? Cytology is generally made up of 2 words. One is cytos and second is logos, right? Cytos is cell and logos is study. So, the branch of the biology which generally deals with the study of the structure, function and organization of the cell is generally called as cytology, right? So, cytology means the study of cell. Okay. So, the first topic which we are going to start today is characteristic features of the cell. Come on, let's talk about characteristic features or the properties of the cell. First, the definition itself. That is, cell is the structural and functional unit of the life. The structure and the function of a body or of an organism is under the control of the cell. Second, every cell generally exists from the pre-existing cell. Right? What do you mean by this? Every cell exists from the pre-existing cell. It means that whatever the new daughter cells are generally formed, they generally arise from the parent cell. That's why every cell generally arises from the pre-existing cell. Third property. Third property says that cell undergoes cell division, cell multiplication and cell duplication. Right? Okay. Cell division, everyone knows. One cell will undergo division to form two daughter cell. Correct? Cell multiplication. As the cell will undergo division, it will divide and it will generally increase the number of cells. That is, one cell will divide to form two daughter cell. Two daughter cell will divide to form four daughter cell. That is multiplication. And the next one is your cell duplication. Whatever the parent cell will be having the DNA, that DNA will be copied into the daughter cell. That means the cell generally undergoes duplication. Next, fourth one, cell undergoes metabolism. Correct? Every cell is having an ability that it undergoes metabolism. What is metabolism? The sum total of all activities taking place in the body of a living organism is generally called metabolism. So cell undergoes metabolism. Fifth property is cell undergoes mutation. Right? Very important word, that is mutation. Right? Okay. Now what do you mean by mutation? The sudden change or the sudden change in the genetic makeup of an organism is generally called mutation, right? You know, every cell generally contains genetic material, that is DNA or RNA, basically DNA. So if there is any change in the DNA content, then it leads to the mutation. So cell is having a property that it undergoes mutation. Sixth one, every cell contains genetic material, DNA or RNA present in the nucleus of a cell that is responsible for transmitting the characters from one generation to another generation. Correct? Cell contains DNA. DNA is the genetic material. It contains the genes. So the genetic information is transferred from one generation to the another generation with the help of genetic material present in the nucleus of the cell. Seventh property, every cell generally contains its cell organelles. Am I right? It contains its cell organelles such as your mitochondria, lysosome, Golgi bodies, endoplasmic reticulum, ribosomes, etc. So this all cell organelles are present in every cell. So it is the major characteristic feature. Next, eighth one, property says that cell has the power of repair and growth and development. What obviously, whatever the growth and development of the body takes place, if there is any kind of a wound, that wound generally gets repaired only due to the presence of the cell. And the last property, which is very, very important, is totipotency. Right? The last property, which is very important, is totipotency. Totipotency is generally made up of two words, totus and potency, right? Totus stands for entire and potency stands for ability, right? The meaning of totus is entire and the meaning of potency is ability. So the ability of a dividing cell, or you can say the ability or a potential of every dividing cell to divide and redivide to produce the entire new organism is generally called totipotency, right? So there is a capability or an ability or a tendency of a cell that it can undergo division. When it undergoes division, after redivision, it generally produces an entire new organism that is generally called totipotency. Right? Okay. A cell is a totipotent. When can I say that the cell is totipotent? A cell is totipotent because it generally contains the genetic information of an organism into the nucleus of a cell. Example, animals, right? You can say about embryonic animal cell are totipotent, right? And they are generally called as stem cell. And this stem cell have a vast application in the medical sciences for the diagnosis of the diseases. That therapy is called as stem cell therapy. So embryonic animal cells are totipotent. These are all the properties of the cell, right? All the characteristic features of the cell. Let's have a next topic, that is cell theory, right? Now, when I talk about the cell theory was generally given by two different biologists or the biology scientists, that is Skaldian and Swan. two biologists, Chaldean and Squan, for the very first time generally introduced the cell theory. Now, what did they mention in the cell theory? What were the highlighting points? Number one, all living organisms are generally made up of cell. No doubt about it. All living organisms, whether it is a plant, animal, microorganism, right? They are generally made up of cell. Second, cell is the structural and functional unit of the life. Correct? The structure, the functioning, the control, regulation of the cell is under the cell. Third point, every cell arises from the pre-existing cell. Do you understand the meaning of this statement? That is, a parent cell will divide and it will lead to the formation of a daughter cell. There was one of the scientists called Rudolf Virchow, right? He said, omnis cellula e cellulae, right? Omnis cellulae e cellulae. It means that every cell arises from the pre-existing cell. Fourth point, right? Cell, when you talk about, there are certain similarities in the chemical and metabolic activity of the cell, right? The chemical reaction taking place in the cell and the metabolic activity are somewhat similar in the cell, right? Sixth point, that is the last point, the cell undergoes self-duplication. It means that cell is having an ability that it can undergo duplication. I told you what is cell duplication. Same copy of a DNA from the parent cell is copied into the daughter cell. That is, cell is having an ability to undergo cell duplication. This were the entire, what you can say, this were the aspects of the cell theory. And they also said that whatever the nucleus, right? Okay, what I mean to say, the gametes, the sex gametes, sperm and the ovum, they will generally contain a nucleus, and those nucleus will generally contain the genetic material DNA. These are all the aspects of the cell theory. Thank you.